Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I am your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Pat Flood on the podcast. He is the founder and CEO of Owners in Honor, which is a veteran nonprofit company that helps transitioning veterans through entrepreneurship through acquisition program. This is a really, really interesting episode. I won't give all of Pat's kind of plaudits, but he is a 26-year military veteran, 20-year Green Beret, MBA, very, very fascinating person. But his whole mission in life post kind of getting out of the military is to build a nonprofit business that could have been a for-profit business, but his mission is to provide value to veterans, not to shareholders. And he mentions this throughout the conversation. We dive deep into what his company does, how it helps veterans find businesses, buy businesses, fund the businesses, but also prepare for life after being in the military. Super fascinating. I think you'll get a ton out of this episode. So let's get Pat on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Pat, thank you for being a guest on the Growth Capital Podcast. Good to see you.
Hey, great meeting you.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. Maybe give us a little bit of an overview of who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now.
Sure. So I'm Pat Flood. I'm the CEO and founder of Owners in Honor. It's a veteran nonprofit that supports veterans in the ETA space, helping them search, grow, and then sell their businesses. I'm physically in Houston. It's a national nonprofit. I spent 26 years in the military, 20 of them as a Green Beret, a couple before that as a special operations signal officer, and also some time in the Army Reserve. Went through ROTC. Am a graduate of George Washington as an undergrad, and then for grad school, Naval Postgraduate School and Duke Fuqua School of Business.
Very cool. Well, we've got a lot to talk about. I guess first things first, Owners in Honor. You mentioned it's about all about the ETA space. Maybe what does ETA mean, and then
Sure.
we'll dig into that.
Yeah, in a simplified form, ETA is a business school naming convention for really buying and selling businesses. I think part of it that gets skipped over is sometimes the growth part of it, driving value during the business operation. But ultimately, it's really full cycle mergers and acquisitions, whether it's acquiring a business, operating it and growing it, or exiting it possibly in a profitable way. We specifically focus on the veteran space because that's the charter of our nonprofit. And then in addition to that, we typically look at really SBA 7A loan or Small Business Administration 7A loan type acquisitions that are usually between $500,000 and $5 million. It's a space that's, although there's a lot of lookers, there's not necessarily a ton of competition from private equity firms, which is good, which means that we can coordinate and collaborate with them instead of being competitors to them. Obviously, as a nonprofit, we don't have the same amount of liquidity that they do. So we don't want to get in a bidding war with anyone. But there's a lot of opportunity for us to have our veterans, because of their leadership and stewardship capabilities, to take what is considered in the market a dented can, help fix it, grow it, be able to then provide value to it, and then possibly even having a private equity fund as an exit strategy.
Got it. So how did you, after your, amazing military career, like how did you think about this as like your next kind of phase of life? Like how did this kind of, all come about? Because I think you've been doing it for a couple of years now, right?
That's right. Yeah. So when I transitioned out, partially because of my older brother who transitioned out as a full colonel out of SOCOM and worked really to the day that he got out of the military, his transition, I think, could have been smoother. And thankfully, I'm a younger brother, so I got to learn from all the things that he did. So in that, I went to business school while I was still in, which is great. It was a lot of work, but it was great for a lot of reasons. I did the executive MBA or weekend MBA program at Duke, which is awesome because it's the same degree, which is also a problem when you have a full-time job and 10 years of work experience, and usually young children. So it's a lot, but at the same time, the impact you have with having a new network and comradeship with people that all have 10 years of work experience. Most people moving from manager to director or senior director, a lot of companies, a lot of, consulting companies, finance companies, banks. So it was great to be able to, as a veteran, have that be part of my transition. But then the other part was I was a recruiting battalion commander in Los Angeles. And in so doing, I wanted to be able to stay in LA after I transitioned, and ended up finding an opportunity at a company called Anderson, formerly Arthur Anderson.
Okay.
And then in it, I was the director of the practice management group, which is essentially the everything that would fall under the chief of staff realm, or what used to happen in the past is the MBA that sort of ran the office versus the tax attorney or the CPA who was in charge of the office.
Got it.
And so what was great about that is that we had acquired the mergers and acquisitions and valuation services from Deloitte in Southern California. And one of my jobs is to either make revenue more efficient, or cost centers more efficient, or to grow a cost center. And it was a brand new cost center. So we had, or profit center. So we had to figure out, how could I help them generate revenue? Obviously, there's a reason that they were given away essentially from Deloitte. And so that was a big charter that I got from my boss, the managing directors, to figure out how to put them to work and get value out of them. And so that was great, because in business school, you don't learn a ton about mergers and acquisitions. And it was really a ton. Like, the people were super gracious with the time. And so being able to sit with them and talk to them and ask them a million questions about how things work. I still am not, I wouldn't consider myself an M&A expert, but it gave me a good window into it. I am a third generation veteran entrepreneur. So my grandfather, who's a first generation American, both on both sides, they were both veteran business owners, veterans and business owners, one from the Navy, the other one from the Army Air Corps. And then my dad was a veteran and a business owner for 35 years. So I am now, I guess, third in line as a veteran and entrepreneur in my family, which is good because it gives me a bias to success, which is helpful. And also a bias toward acquisition, vice startup, partially because of the volatility that comes with startup, and a lot of the extra work that comes into being able to create, and creativity, quite frankly. So being able to create a product that's market ready, that is filling a niche, that has demand, that there isn't market saturation for all the other things, and then really being able to do it on the fly without typically with a lot of bootstrap money. Is that the last part of the story of how I got to where I'm at, is that I was part of a veteran transition organization, and they were presenting entrepreneurship, and I happened to be on the corporate panel, and they presented them the same day only because of COVID. And so I had an opportunity to see the entrepreneurship panel, and on it, they only talked about startup entrepreneurship. And I was like, oh, it's really interesting. I wonder why. And then came to find out that probably 90% of the veteran nonprofits that help people in the entrepreneur space are all focused on startup entrepreneurship, either ideation, acceleration, early stage, capital readiness, or capital preparation, or requisition, and pitches and all of that stuff. And so I was like, it's interesting. Some of it, I think, is because it's, quite frankly, sexier than doing a merger and acquisition. You're hanging out with a bunch of bankers, brokers, and diligence people.
Yeah.
To be able to do a 6-minute pitch, usually a little bit of entertainment is involved in that, and some preparation. This is not that. And so I had a veteran that night who asked me if he could help me, or if I could help him find a business to buy. And so I tried to help him, because I thought I had the right network, and I ended up having to put a pin in it after about 4 months, and contacting a lot of people, to include a lot of other veteran nonprofits. And I just couldn't figure out how to get him help, because he really needed a lot of baseline education and capital preparedness before he actually started looking. And I wasn't in a position to be able to do that myself. I had just transitioned myself. I had, had a full-time job where I was spending, 60, 70 hours a week, trying to make sure that I didn't get fired at my first, real, quote unquote, real job after the military. Right. and I had a pregnant wife. Unfortunately, now my ex-wife, but I had a lot on my plate, and I was like, "This is a glass ball I just can't handle right now." So I put a pin in it. Then it ended up happening that through sort of personal things that ended up happening, my ex-wife moved to Houston along with her son. I needed to move, talk to my company, amazing company. They were going to give me a very robust severance package, which gave me plenty of time to be able to find something, probably in consulting at KPMG or Deloitte or whatever. And I had a great mentor who said, "Hey, you've been talking about helping veterans in a way that was fulfilling to you for a long time. I know you don't like the concept of startups. However, what if you figured out financially, if now that you've moved from a very high income state or high cost of living state to one that's less so, and you got your pension and your total and permanent disability rating, is there a way that with the severance package you could afford to not pay yourself for a year or two?" And I was like, "That's the craziest thing anyone has ever said to me." But I like them and I trust them. And so I took it home and I ran the numbers and I was like, yeah, it'd be tight in 2 years, but I think I could do it for 18 months. And then the question was, if I didn't do it, what was the cost?
Mm.
And so the cost is not knowing if the thing that I could tell the market needed didn't happen, if I could live with that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think I could live with that. And so what was great is as soon as really I made the decision, and it was, somewhat faith-based, I did prayer and things of that nature to figure out, is this something that I feel compelled to do or called to do versus something that I'm going to do for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And really that's part of the reason that I pursued it as a nonprofit instead of a for-profit, like sort of a micro private equity or search fund or whatever
Yeah.
that I think there's a lot of now, is that my main goal is to not deliver value to shareholders. My main goal is to help veterans find fulfillment in their transition path and make sure that we can mitigate what came to light much more evident the more I looked into it, how many times they were getting taken advantage of by buy-side brokers and other people within sort of the value extraction part of finding a business because they didn't know who to talk to and they didn't have a trusted advisor.
Yeah.
And so most of the trusted advisors were coming from other veterans who had searched and purchased a business. But now you're getting one person with one iteration of one experience that's probably unique to their experience, trying to mentor somebody else who's going through it for the very first time. And I was like, I know that there are people within this, whether in private equity, whether in the independent sponsor, realm, or people that have owned and acquired multiple businesses already, that I think would want to help. And as soon as I started talking about it to people, people started coming to me to ask me how they could help me. So that's kind of how it started.
Very, very fascinating. Thank you for the kind of the detailed overview. And I think one thing you mentioned, and I maybe didn't capture it exactly how you said it, but your mission is to provide value to veterans, not to shareholders. I think that's like super interesting. Because you could have started this as a search fund aggregator kind of platform and made a ton of money and all that fun stuff and still help people, but it may not feel as good, or you may not have had enough impact or as much impact as you're probably having now. So
I think I learned a great lesson, and I just got off a podcast like earlier today that was talking about my transition sort of thing. And I think a lot of veterans do what I did, is that, I was a business school graduate, I was a Green Beret, I was a lieutenant colonel, and I kind of came out saying, pay me MFer. And that was the main thing I was really focused on. And after getting paid really well for 3 years, I felt empty and unfulfilled. And I knew that eventually I was going to wake up on the wrong side of the grass. And I was like, I got to find something that's providing fulfillment. So like during COVID, my ex and I gave almost 1,000 hours of volunteer work to the Salvation Army, did like 2 or 3 nights a week. We were serving food to people, and that still didn't cut, because it's great to be able to serve people, but it's amazing to serve your own tribe.
Yeah. No, I love it. Let's unpack it a little bit more. So are you only looking at helping veterans that are transitioning to go through and buy a business, or are you helping veterans that may have already transitioned. Maybe they've been in the workforce for 5 or 10 years, but they've had the entrepreneurial bug, but they're not as much of an entrepreneur that wants to start a business, but they're probably a really good operator, and they would be amazing at running and scaling a business. Like
Yep.
where do you kind of land in that area?
So I would say that the initial customer concentration that we thought it would be was actually going to be within the non-commissioned officer corps, which I think is underemployed when they get out, but incredibly capable. And most of the transition organizations I would submit are built by officers for officers. So somebody with a degree that's easy to be placed within Amazon or a large corporation. It's harder sometimes to place non-commissioned officers who have been really dedicated to duty because they don't have 4-year degrees. And like my firm required everybody to include the EAs to have 4-year degrees. So that's a big obstacle for a lot of people. And then, so that was the initial concept of customer concentration. What it ended up actually being is exactly what you're talking about. So it's really 2 segments of people. One is that people that I think have a passion for it, and they want to have that as their next step, and they've already identified it before they get out. There's been a ton of, research and data that's been developed about the silver tsunami, gray wave. There's been Walker Deeble's stuff, Cody Sanchez's stuff. So they have the bug and they want to go do the thing. What they're coming to us for is risk mitigation. So they feel that some of the other things are value extractors that feel like a marketing pyramid, and that they don't know, they can't measure, or they can't really see the ROI of them being able to go through the program, pay for a program, and then what's the expected outcome, how many people are successful at actually acquiring in what period of time,
right?
Which is not what those organizations measure, which is fine. And then the other group are the people, quite frankly, like me. Like, I don't think after getting out, I would have been ready. I probably would have been ready leadership wise and capability wise, but I was definitely not ready psychologically to take on my own business acquisition. And that's where, us engaging either folks that have gone into, they're interested in acquisition, but they want a W-2 job or they want a paid job, is to be able to talk to private equity firms as, here, general managers, operating partners, you name it, that can actually be the CEO of maybe a platform company.
Yeah.
They're great at operators, but it gives them an opportunity to not have to worry about, they still have to worry about KPIs, but not in the same way that you do as an individual business owner. And you have a whole back office a lot of times of ops guys that can help support you. That gives you, I think, a little bit more gracious pathway to learning stuff. Or we get a lot of guys from investment banking, for me, from finance or from consulting, who have done it for 5 or 10 years. They've made good money and they're just not feeling fulfilled, or they want to have a lot more latitude. And great example, there's a veteran in our program right now who made well over like mid 6 figures at a large consulting company. And he was like, I would rather make $150,000 a year and have more control over my time.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so that's either, there's no way to do that in corporate America. You can't take suddenly a $350,000 pay cut and then expect any amount of responsibility.
Right.
And so unless you go buy something and then you have all the responsibility and you're making less money, which is strange because I think most people would be like, that's a terrible value proposition. But for him, psychologically, it's super impactful. And he wants to be able to, because he's made the money. So he wants at this point to be able to build an asset, sell an asset, and then also be able to dictate where, how does he defer his taxes? So does he give to charity? Does he give to a local, athletic organization? Does he sponsor Little League? What does he do with his money? Like, he wants to be able to not just have a vote, but he wants to be able to have the vote and how that stuff is done.
And so if I'm a veteran that's transitioning and maybe they grew up in an entrepreneurial family, right? And so they want to, go down this path, but maybe they're not so risk forward that they're going to start a business, right? So they're like, cool, I'm a good operator. I've got, experience, from my family that they were, entrepreneurs. What does a program look like? So how does is there like a training part? Obviously there's some type of introductions to businesses that are interested in selling the business, right? So like maybe
Yeah,
walk me through the steps of the process.
sure.
Cause I think I find it very fascinating.
So it's laid out, strangely enough, a lot like military operations. So it comes in
Okay.
6 phases,
Okay.
which is very familiar for those who know what is it? It's the operationalization of combat. So it starts in
Okay.
phase 0. So really it's 7 phases, including phase 0. Phase 0 is really us though. Making sure that we're prepared to take people on, making sure that we understand the battlefield and the environment that we're operating in. But really, phase 1 starts. I'm an interested veteran. I want to come in, and it's basic education and modules about basic education. So, one of which is entrepreneurial education, sort of 101, to make sure that, and each phase is a vetting phase. There's
Okay.
a vetting opportunity of every phase. Either you self vet, or we could say, hey, we're not the right organization for you
Right.
because you do want to do a startup, or you do want late stage or early stage capital. In which
Yep.
case, then we will pivot them out to the right organization so they don't waste a ton of time in our program learning a bunch of other stuff that's completely irrelevant to
Got it.
them. And so then we go through the modules. Modules cover like basic financial readiness. So really, the first part is really financial literacy, because there's no financial literacy is typically taught to transitioning veterans. Some people can essentially test out of it because they already got it, or they've been
Okay.
working for a long time. Like they don't need to go to that part, and we give them a waiver. The next one is really it is understanding your benefits and why your benefits are important to being able to apply for an SBA loan and
Mm,
also be able to pursue business acquisition. So we have a module that's worked with essentially veteran VA disability people that make sure that people are either pursuing their VA disability rating or that they've maximized their VA disability rating. Because when you're either applying for a loan or when you're taking on a company, it's great to be able to have that liquidity that you can
yeah.
count on every month, or capital that you can count on every month. And then another one is certified financial planning for acquisition. So helping them understand, because the other thing that doesn't happen in transition, nobody gets certified financial planning. So they don't have a 10-year financial horizon. They have no idea what they want to do financially in 10 years or why they're going to
Okay.
do it. And that all of these things inform what the culmination is, which is really phase 2, which is the buy box exercise. So
Okay.
the buy box exercise is now you have all of that stuff. So in the first financial literacy one, you've built most of the documentation out to do the personal financial data sheet that the SBA has. In the financial preparation for acquisition, then you're looking at what size acquisition do I actually need to make in order to be able to find the SDE required in order for me to be able to meet my financial goals. So that helps them narrow down their window of what they're looking for. We recommend with waiver, if you can not have to do it if you've been out for a long time, but for every veteran to go through a transition program that does other things like whole life stuff,
Mm,
so that they understand where they want to live, which is a big deal because we over index on geography,
okay.
because it makes it easier for us to help people search. And it also, you'll understand the rest of the program in a second and why it makes other things easier. And then they do the buy box exercise, they send it in, we evaluate it, then we do an interview, and then they become a fellow, which is phase 3, which is when they're searching. So a searcher is the same word for us as a fellow. It's hard to become a searcher for us because a searcher is capital ready, they're geography ready, they have a differentiator, they already have their sort of buy side story, and they have a timeline that we know when they're actually going to be able to acquire a business and operate it. So
Got
some
it.
people start in the program when they're still serving, so they can't operate a business just yet.
Right.
And then once we have a search and acquisition director that then helps them look for the business. So we don't search for them. What we do though is we develop relationships with exit planners, wealth advisors, brokers, bankers, so that we then send out a monthly buy list to those people that were our partners, letting them know here are all the buyers that are capital ready in your geography. If something comes up, here are the things that they're looking at. And then they let us know that hey, there's a match, because it's easier for them as a broker to be
Yep.
able to know someone's already ready and standing by. We took those lessons from serial searchers who had searched and purchased multiple companies, is that typically they would develop a relationship long-term with a broker, and then that broker would just keep feeding them deals. And if it
Yeah.
fit, it fit. If it didn't, they would just pass it on to someone else. And then a lot of times they would get a referral fee from the broker if they found someone else to buy it.
Hmm.
So what's great about it is that if we have multiple veterans in the same MSA, you could potentially refer from one to the next. One will be obviously higher in the OML because he's either more ready or he's been searching longer. And then that guy, if it doesn't fit his buy box, you can pass it to the next guy. And then the next guy will take a look at it. Because of that, we can also help them with a LOI template. That is one where it makes diligence for our diligence partners a lot easier to do, so that you don't have to spend oodles and oodles of money on diligence. And a lot of the diligence can be done for us from M&A law firms or accounting firms that will provide pro bono work for us because we're a nonprofit. So there's always going to be a cost, but the cost can be minimized based on the fact that they're getting a nonprofit benefit from it.
Right.
The actual firms are. Then they go through the acquisition, they make the acquisition, and then they get an executive coach that focuses on their life and really how are you fully functioning as a human being, a family member, member of faith, member of your community. Are you fulfilled? Is this actually scratching your itch? All the stuff that for us really is the things that prevent catastrophic outcomes, whether that's divorce, suicidal ideations, drug addiction, or anything else that could happen to veterans in this space. We want to make sure that they have a lifeline. And then the other person they get is a small business advisor. That small business advisor is attached to an allied service network. So that allied service network is everything from fractional CFOs, fractional HR, fractional accounting, you name it. And then all of those people provide free assessments and then discounted services for 1 year to the veteran. But we don't pay for that. The veteran will pay for it, but at a discount. And then that is phase 4. Then phase 5 is really sustaining. So then phase 5 starts at year 5 of our relationship with them. Year up to 5, 1 to 5, is a lot of heavy engagement with those advisors, making sure everything that we're trying to level out the J curve as fast as we can. Year 5 is when ideally they can tell us to go pound sand or beat feet. Like we don't need you around anymore, because that's the other thing that we were getting back from a lot of people that had gotten funders, is that either they left too early, so they asked for early liquidation like before year 3, which was creating a lot of stress on them, or they would hang around forever and constantly, essentially meddle within the business that at that point they knew enough to be able to do themselves. And so we wanted to make sure it wasn't a 10-year horizon for them to buy us out. And then that's the other thing. I'll explain about the revenue in a second. And then phase 6 is really we call the Seller Summit. And that's where we start phase 6 at phase 4, where we start introducing them to exit planners, helping them understand that they're developing an asset, have them develop a value creation plan, an expectation for succession, and ideally a succession or exit timeline. They don't have to execute it based on that timeline, but they have to have a plan. And then from that, it ideally long-term would be one of the mitigating factors that you don't have all these businesses that have no exit plan and therefore are getting sold at a fraction of what they're actually worth. And then the way that we work, does that answer your question, or do you want to? And then
no, I mean, I've got probably a million questions, but I know we don't have a million hours to dig in. But no, I appreciate the flow. I mean, it seems extremely thoughtful, and you found support for the entrepreneur through every stage of the process, right? Because obviously there's people in there that help them not only on the business side, but like you said, on the family side, on the life side, on the mental side of like, what does it mean to transition? What also does it mean to be a business owner and having, all these people rely on you to grow this business and all that fun stuff. So I probably have millions of questions, but that laid it out in a succinct enough fashion that I think myself and the listeners probably took a lot away from it. So thank you.
Next time in Austin, we can grab lunch and I'll lay out all the details too, if you want.
Love it. You mentioned kind of the revenue side. So obviously you're a nonprofit, but like is there a cost for the veteran to get into the program and go through the process? How does that all work?
Yes,
at a high level.
There's not a cost. So all of the first 2 phases is free.
Okay.
First 2 phases of education, doing all that stuff. By the time that you want to search, if you want us to help you search, then you sign a contract with us. Okay. That contract is where the stickiness comes in. So there's 2 parts of it. One is that there is 5% equity that is recommended to be conveyed. That conveyed equity should be in shares, common shares from the seller to us, because the seller actually has a capital gains tax benefit from being able to give to a charity. It minimizes their capital gains exposure. And then what's interesting is it creates us as a minority owner, which is great for the bank. So the bank then looks at us as having a sticky relationship with the people we're advising. So the bank isn't stuck on the hook of being the only people that have to deal with their problems. And then the banks that we associate them with all know us really well. And it's the 3 major SBA lenders and then about 22 regional banks. And so and that's always growing. The more we know, the more banks grow. And then from that, then at year 3, if we also then help them advise the company, then starting at year 3, at the beginning of year 3, we do a 3% profit share based on the difference between EBITDA from startup from start to where they are now. And then from that, then they have an option at year 5. So it's 2 years of profit share, really. Okay. So your option at year 5 that they can buy us out at the cost of capital, at the cost of the shares when we first were conveyed them. So
got it.
With a 5% administrative fee because we have to be able to account for inflation. But what ends up happening is that you have a similar relationship to a self-funded searcher who maybe has a couple of investors and advisors, but as far as the market's concerned, we're about 25% of the regular cost. And our goal is to really just pay our advisors enough to be able to keep them doing it. Yeah. So because as a nonprofit, we have the other 2 traditional revenue streams that a nonprofit has, which is grants. And then the other one is, sponsorships and donations.
Got it. That is a very fascinating structure, and it seems like your incentives are all aligned, right? Like you provide free education, so any veteran coming out, I'm sure the education alone has helped probably people transition. Yep. and maybe realize this maybe not the right path for them, but they didn't have to invest $10, $20, $30,000, whatever it is, to get into the guru program, right? They were able to get in, test it, see what get some actionable insight, and then decide what they want to do from there. Can you? I know you've only been running it for about 2 years. So have you had people go kind of in through phase 4 and they've acquired a business and now they're operating, or where are you in kind of the life cycle?
Yeah, currently we have 16 searchers. We have 2 that have acquired a business. We have 2 businesses that we jumped straight into basically phase 4 or phase 5. We didn't help them search at all. So they'd already closed on a business and needed help. Okay. And so that's a slightly different schedule. What we provide them is really a contracted service that's well below market. So it's like 35% market rate.
Got it.
That again just covers our costs because we're not trying to make a profit on it.
Yeah.
And then from that, then the 2 that have acquired, both are good stories. One acquired, and this is like Pegasus unicorn acquisition, but was exiting out of the military, identified that he wanted us to help him. We helped him identify a business, and then he closed on it 90 days later.
Wow.
There was a lot of cost that I think went into that. So a lot of lessons learned. We didn't have the banking relationships. It was almost 2 years ago. We didn't have the banking relationships we have now. So we ended up using an SBA loan broker, which now we won't need to do anymore. So there was obviously the ancillary cost that got passed on. But from that, we ended up getting an SBA loan written and approved in less than 2 weeks. Wow. So, which is fast, but it costs money. So it's, you're either going to get something cheap, good, or fast. Yep. And so in that case, it was expensive, but cheap and fast.
But fast. Yeah.
And so, cheap and it was good and fast. And so but he's doing really well now. We were actually the 12th offer. The biggest differentiator was the fact that it was a veteran and someone that wanted to carry on the legacy of the company and not roll it up into something different. So that was the biggest part. The second biggest part was the fact that our veterans are mostly transitioning into places they came from. So he was from that environment, went to the high school that they were giving a student lunch program for. So all this stuff really, it was a very human story, which reminds a lot of people of sort of sending seller letters to people when they were buying houses in the hot housing market to try to differentiate themselves. Very similar to that, but it's all stuff that we coach them to do to make sure that they're prepared to be able to have those conversations. The other one's success story. We didn't share within the equity of it at all because they ended up purchasing a franchise instead. But we saved the individual probably at least a year of time. So he's been with us 7 months. He just acquired 2 franchises. But we led them through, I think, about 7 LOIs up to
Oh,
that
wow.
point. A lot of the price points for free. So a lot of those price points for the organizations that, or the companies that was doing, were probably too high. What was great is that we used the SBA as a backstop, potentially really mainly to create a third-party valuation that's conservative. Because sometimes if you get the wrong broker who's representing a business, they're going to overvalue it. And then the only people who can really buy it are people with cash.
Yeah.
And so it turned out that's why it was probably the last one was probably overvalued, is because they only wanted a private equity firm to be able to buy it, because he just wanted out. But
Yeah.
that goes back to the fact that seller hadn't considered selling until 2 years before he sold, or he's
Right.
trying to sell. So
Yeah.
he
They
hadn't
didn't get
done
the
all the
exit
exit
plan.
planning and preparation. So he wasn't actually maximizing his value. He was maximizing his cash value. So which is two, as you know, two different things. And so it's like, it's great, but ultimately, if you're going to put in the work, you could probably get a higher multiple than if you're just trying to press someone for an all cash offer.
Yeah. What I'm curious about, the obviously 16 searchers, what types of businesses are they targeting? Obviously it's geo-specific, right? If you've got people in different parts of the country, maybe
Yep.
different, but are these typically, and you mentioned, I think earlier, like 500K to a $500,000.
Yeah.
So they're not, they're kind of under that private equity threshold typically, but are
Yeah. So
they?
I mean, some are the same stuff that private equity's looking at, but it's just too small for them. So home services stuff is always good. Landscaping, the typical ones, window washing.
Yeah.
Moving companies are good, but small accounting firms, law firms have been on the docket. Urgent cares, like independent urgent cares, veterinary clinics.
Hmm.
Those are becoming more problematic now. So the SBA changed their rule for 2026, is that you can't waive the certificates that were required to create the revenue for those companies that are certificate heavy. So I think the reason the SBA did it is to try to put a wedge in between private equity rolling up a lot of these companies and not. The
Yeah.
problem is that the veteran-owned business, veteran service disabled veteran-owned business is the same group. So now these certified veteran-owned businesses that have had 80% of their contracts tied to their revenue are now getting devalued at 80%. So the other thing that they're looking at right now, a lot of our veterans are actually veteran-owned businesses,
Mm.
because the way that the veteran exiting is going to get the highest valuation is by selling it to another veteran.
I was going to ask you if you had almost like a full cycle wheel, not necessarily that you would, a searcher that bought a business would sell
Yeah.
it to another veteran because it probably would be too big to maybe be out of that $5 million kind of threshold. But I would imagine that if you're a veteran that started a business or own a business, being able to sell it to the next generation veteran,
Yeah.
is probably an ideal scenario.
Yeah. So for us, I mean, the perfect world is the virtuous circle, right? So we help a veteran search for a business, buy a business, and then sell it to another veteran. That's like the
Yep.
virtuous circle. Eventually that always is going to end if the business is good business, because it's going to grow too big for the 7
Right.
So then what ends up happening is that we have some capital providers throughout the company or throughout the country who are willing to come in as a minority owner, and then be able to help a veteran buy a business that's maybe bigger than $5 million, still under typically the low middle market threshold for a private equity company. Or there's now a couple private equity firms that are actually looking to come in as holds. So they're
Okay.
coming in as a minority partner on multiple things. And so instead of being the managing partner on a platform, they're building essentially a hold platform, which is also interesting. And that's great that we haven't looked at private equity like our competitors. We're looking at it like it's just capitalism marketplace. And so if we
Yeah.
can figure out how to provide value to them and they can to us, then that's great. And we're going to always try to avoid sort of the 700-pound gorilla if we can. There's no reason to have a full frontal assault with somebody who has a lot more money than you. And there's a lot of opportunity, and there's going to be more opportunity coming up. And then,
Well, and also they're the exit potentially,
yep,
right?
yeah,
Like if
yeah.
they get to the
You don't
certain
want to,
point, and
yeah,
if you can engage, I've talked to a couple of private equity groups that they love getting into businesses or getting aware of businesses when they're too small for their threshold, because they can
yeah,
essentially say, if you can do these things, right? Like maybe they score that business as like a 80%, but like it needs to be 100% in order to buy them.
Yeah.
Obviously growth, revenue, EBITDA, all that stuff. Like if you can hit that threshold, well, then that company or that private equity group's more likely than not to be like, that's what we want. Thank you. We'll take it from here, kind of thing. And then you get, roll some equity in that, and you get 2 bites of the cherry. So
there's a couple of private equity firms that we have partnerships with that if something fits that sort of 70%, 80% threshold for them, they'll provide it to us as a referral. And then if one of our guys buys it, then they would get right of first refusal to be able to purchase the company.
Yep.
It's not a compulsion for the seller to sell it, but a right of first refusal once it reaches a certain EBITDA size. And then it's great for them, great for us. The biggest cost for them is searching, doing the diligence, and trying to fix it. So if we can do that already and essentially fix the dented can, and then it's a great acquisition for them, and it fits their fund size, then it's perfect world. Because eventually then they'll have the problem that we don't want to have, which is trying to sell a small cap business into the middle market, which is a whole different animal. And then the other thing that I think is interesting is there is opportunity for us to help businesses that are veteran owned that are even bigger than that size that one of our veterans would buy. So some of those companies that are, they have $5 million in revenue, or they're just too big, right, for an SBA loan to be able to buy, but it's maybe founder led. They don't have wealth advisors. They don't have exit planners. They don't have an M&A attorney. We can help them connect to vendors that we have vetted in that space. And then those vendors are providing discounts to those firms. And then what it does for us is that we want to make sure that the veterans who own the business get the highest multiple possible, which then creates a wealth event, which then creates capital gains exposure, which then compels them typically to create a donor advised fund, which then more likely than not we will be the recipients of, but not necessarily. So our goal is to we don't need to make money on that because we're a nonprofit. It'd be nice if we did, but our real goal is to provide the value to the community and making sure. And part of the reason that we do it that way too is my origin story is my dad, when he exited his company, didn't have an M&A attorney, didn't have someone to be able to help him exit his company, and sold it for about 1/6 of the value because he had a family attorney to prepare the sale, and
got it.
Was pitted up against a private equity firm with 3 M&A attorneys, and was put on a restrictive contract that's unenforceable, legal, but unenforceable, and et cetera, et cetera. And he didn't know any of it and didn't know who to talk to. And so what we're trying to do is be able to give veterans who are business owners someone to talk to that we can vet. So if something goes sideways, we can actually call someone.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah. I mean, there's a ton there that you're adding value. And I guess the other piece of that I just thought about, and I don't know if this is something that you guys have probably already thought about, but if you go into these bigger businesses, you probably have people that have gone through your program that that are maybe not at the right level to be a business owner and operator, but they're probably a really good number 2, right? Or they're really good.
That's exactly right. So when we do something called ETA Day Zero events at universities, and when we talk to the MBA students, because it's a great place to recruit, but when you talk to the MBA students, because I didn't know if you knew this, but over 50% of veterans go to business school because they want to be entrepreneurs, and business school doesn't really teach entrepreneurship. So it's interesting, and what we can take advantage of the mismatch by being able to say, no, that there actually is a way, and there are some schools that specialize in it. And so one, if you contact us early enough, we'll get you to a school that actually specializes in it, ideally in a place you're going to live.
Right.
And then the second part is that when we do these events, we talk to them about the different pathways to acquisition. So one of the pathways is private business. Another pathway is franchise. Another pathway is actually being, a managing or being a general manager for something like Apex Service Partners, where you're going to go be an executor, learn about stuff. You may even be able to get granted some equity in the company, typically not ownership shares, but you're going to be able to benefit from the learning curve. That unlike me, where I spent multiple years in finance and was adjacent to managing the P&L, you're managing a P&L, plus you have that backstop of the operational support folks that are typically at the private equity firm. But yeah, there's really 3 pathways.
I love it. I think what you're doing is super fascinating, and I think while it's geared towards veterans, this could be built in the same vein for anybody, right? To go through this process and not just have it be focused on how can we generate the highest return, but to your point, like how can we add value to the community and veterans and all these other people. I think it's super awesome. I want to be respectful of your time. We've been talking for
Sure.
a while, and it's been a ton of fun. And like I said, I've got probably 1,000 more questions that we could dig into. And when we see each other next, we'll do that. But if we're recording this in kind of late September, I guess if we jumped on a call 12 months from now, another Zoom
Mhm.
or another podcast, like what's like one or two things that you would love to have done in the business that would make that next conversation really really successful?
Yeah, so I think the first part would be really to have, of those 16 searchers, all 16 have acquired a business. I think it'd be
Mm,
fantastic. It's crazy that we've really only been fully operational less than a year, and we've had 2 acquisitions already. And so
yeah,
that's pretty good. And there's been a lot of near misses, as you know. And so the more people we have searching, the better odds we have of actually closing something. The other part is that this time next year, we'll have a lot of veteran business owners that are getting the relief that my dad didn't get, and being
mm,
able to learn from the platform that we'll have rolled out, and we'll be understanding the exit planning opportunity, have a lot less stress and anxiety in their own families, and then mitigate, the financial loss that could happen if they don't prepare properly.
got it. I love it. Pat, this has been a lot of fun. Let's end the episode the same way I do with everyone, with a 3 pack of questions. So first question is, what's an influential book or podcast that you might recommend to the audience?
Yeah. So I'm currently a scholar at the President uh, George W. Bush Presidential Center in
Okay.
something called the Veteran Leadership Program, and I was never either a fan or a non fan of the president. I think, especially as a service member, you always want whatever president you're following under to be successful. You always want your leader to be successful. So
Yeah.
I didn't really, but because of that, I don't really read a lot of the stuff that the president's put out. And because I was in the center, I had the opportunity to read a book called Decision Points.
Okay.
And I think it's incredible because it humanizes the process of extraordinarily hard decisions
Hmm.
that you're sometimes choosing from a variety of 3 bad options. And it's like, which option of these is the least worst option?
Yeah.
And going through real time stuff that a lot of us don't know the ins and out of. We know the output, but we don't know how the decision was made. And you can actually unpack that and see how humble and gracious and, deferent up to a point uh, the president had been to subject matter experts. I think is and the even the cross political lines, human relationships that he had to really make things make sense, I think
Yeah.
is was just foundational. I think it's one of those things where um, there's a quote. I also read a fair amount of Lincoln. Is that Lincoln said? There's a quote he has where he says, "I don't like that man. It must mean I need to get to know him better."
Hmm. That's
So
great.
it's one of those things like, ask more questions. What we're seeing on the surface probably isn't the whole thing.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's a bumper sticker right there. I love it. Second question here: what is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
So I had the opportunity. This is a positive thing, positive spin in what could have been a bad story. So I got the opportunity for the Taliban to blow me through a wall in Afghanistan in 2007. So I broke my neck,
Okay.
and I was forcibly acquainted with swimming
Okay.
because I couldn't really run or bike because of the neck injury.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I love swimming now. When I was in California before I moved to Texas, I would swim between the Venice and Santa Monica Pier a couple times a week.
Oh wow.
And it is, other than riding a motorcycle, which probably doesn't seem like swimming to a lot of people, it's when you're doing it, you're doing exactly one thing.
Oh, 100%.
And so it's cathartic and meditative. And like swimming, obviously, if you're distracted, you're going to drown. In riding a motorcycle, I would submit it's the same thing for those who ride motorcycles, is that if you're a really astute motorcyclist that drives defensively, you don't have headphones in, you're on a swivel riding your motorcycle. That's it. That's all you're doing. Not thinking about work. You're not thinking about anything else. And both of those things to me have a sense of catharsis to it. And I don't do very much motorcycle riding here in Texas because it's 8,000 degrees outside, and I feel like I'd melt off my bike. But definitely the swimming for sure.
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of time swimming a few years ago, so totally appreciate. You have to be focused on one thing and one thing only, and that makes a ton of sense. Last question here: favorite vacation spot?
Well, that's tough. As of late, so this is also maybe a little bit of a picture into who I am. I grew up in a small vacation community on the shores of Lake Michigan called Door County in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And growing up there, I couldn't wait to leave. I live in a town of 315 people that grows to like 10 or 15,000 during the summer. And it's all the villages are really close to each other. So it like 100 X's during the summer. But during the winter, there's no one around and everybody's in your business. And so now that I'm older and I've seen so much of the world, and I've seen, especially as a leader, how communities really affect kids and how it affects outcomes. The appreciation I have for where I grew up now is exponential. Like I can't even describe it. The fact that, me doing miscreant stuff as a kid led to community service hours and not a criminal record. And then those community service hours, quite frankly, helped me get into college. Is the difference of a small community versus sometimes a place where law enforcement officers don't know who you are. They don't know your family. They don't know what your story is. And it's very point of impact, impactful in a lot of times a negative way. And then the other part is that it's beautiful. And now that I've seen more of the world, I appreciate it for what it was. And so it's Door County, Wisconsin. Actually, the town is called Ephraim in Wisconsin. So everyone during the summer, I would go now until probably the end of October. Okay. And then unless you're interested in cold weather and trees without leaves, I would wait again until the spring, until about May. And then it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet, I think.
Brilliant. Love it. Well, Pat, if people want to learn more about you, more about Owners in Honor, any of those things, like what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah. So one way is always the one, if I don't spell the website, or if it's hard to find because you're Googling it and maybe you didn't spell it right or whatever, is go to my LinkedIn. My name's Patrick Michael Flood. On the LinkedIn, I look like this. And you can always connect me there. I get a flood of stuff. I probably talk to about 10 or 20 veterans a week. But I love doing, especially the veterans, have cups of coffee with them, virtual cups of coffee. To get to know about them, 15, 20 minutes, and then see if I could help them. There are a lot of folks that transitioned before me that did the same thing for me that really helped me through the process, both give me community, but also a lot of guidance. And then the other part is go to the website. So www.ownersinhonor.org. On it, you'll get to see our whole program. If you're a buyer, there's going to be a tab that says you're a potential buyer. Click in the tab. You'll fill out a sheet. We'll get in contact with you. If you're a seller, same thing, hit the sell tab, fill out a sheet. If you're interested in donating, so we talked about the revenue for this, until we get to the point that some of those, the profit sharing, or we're a little bit more mature as a revenue share, a socioeconomic enterprise with these companies that we're helping buy, we always need to raise funds. And so anyone who wants to contact and either provide time, treasure, or talent to us, please contact us either through the website or through my own LinkedIn.
Awesome. We'll have all that stuff in the show notes so people can find it super easily. Pat, man, thank you very much for what you've done. And thank you for the time. This has been, very, very fascinating. And again, I could probably talk another hour or two, but I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.